All right, welcome everyone. We're recording and are about ready to begin our Crucifixion of the King of Glory reading group. Today we're talking about chapter 2. Uh, okay, Paula asked for the link. Okay, I can send that to her real quick, I think. It's on the parish calendar. But all right, there's Marlene. Good, people are coming to us. All right. All right. Hi, Marlene. How you doing?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing well, thanks.
Good. Glad to hear it. Okay, we're sending the link to someone who wants to join us. Just give me
I
a
always have
second.
such a hard time getting in this. Luckily, I did.
Oh, good.
I'm not very computer savvy.
Well, we're glad you were able to join us. Okay, Linda, you can let Paula know that I sent her the link. Oh, and Lori's asking for the same thing. It's on the. It's. I won't. This is being recorded, so no commentary. Okay. For those who are joining us afterwards, if you want to join us next time, the link is on the parish calendar, the parish Google calendar. Lori. There we go, and sent. Okay, so a few more people are going to jump on, I guess, but let's get started. There's Paula, so it is working. Great. Sorry. 3 pages long, so I doubt we'll even get through all of that, and I'll send them out again at the end, as we did last time. I think we should. I wanted to start right on page 25, which is the first page of the chapter. But before we do that, does anyone have any particular comments or questions that they want to bring up to make sure that we cover that you are interested in covering while we're here tonight? We'll try to keep it to about an hour. Like I said, we may not get through everything, but excuse me, I think we can get through a lot. Okay, so I'm going to take it that nobody does. So let's start with page 25. So the first quote that I thought was interesting from the reading: about the age of 30, Jesus began a rather unconventional ministry of teaching and healing, preaching repentance and the nearness of the kingdom of God. So around the age of 30. What you may know or you may not know is that the canonical age to be ordained a priest in the Orthodox Church is 30. And that's why, because that's when Christ began his ministry. So if you're in a residential seminary setting, that could be younger. I was ordained at 26, but I wasn't sent to a parish to be the rector of the parish until I was right about 30. Maybe I was 29, some change. But anyway, but the rule is 30 as a rule, and that's why, because that's when Christ began to preach. So those kind of little points I think are interesting and important.
Is anyone else having problems hearing Father Gregory?
Yes.
Yes. Or maybe he has to go. Oh, here's back.
So we're having some major connectivity issues at the church, unfortunately. So I may fade. It's completely control.
Yeah, you're frozen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When it was just he and I, it was not clear whether it was him or I, but now it's pretty clear.
Oh, are you kicking us out?
Am I kicking you out?
Nope. It's just we have a fiber optic internet service at church now. It's super fast, but it keeps going out. So being fast from time to time is not useful. And because they gave it to us for free, I guess they will never answer any of our questions. So we're going to have to get rid of it, even though it's free. We have to actually pay somebody to get somebody to help us to do this. So, and especially with the festival coming up, we really need to have internet that works so we can process those credit cards. Anyway, so the next quote that I think is interesting, I thought was interesting anyway, also on page 25, everyone was welcome to join his movement, including those with a wayward past who had been rejected by establishment Judaism. Uneducated laborers, fishermen, tradesmen, former tax collectors, the once demon-possessed, and even women. So those some interesting comments there, interesting points there. Wonder if anybody has any thoughts about that before I continue talking too much. Yep,
Well,
even women, that's right. Go
thank
ahead.
you. So I'm thinking that because the background in Judaism in those days was you have to be perfect, you have to follow the law, otherwise God is not going to love you because you're not perfect. There was something like almost a breath of fresh air for Jesus to say, I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if you were a prostitute or a tax collector. God loves everybody. And it was probably a new thing for everybody in Judaism, because I'm thinking that if I grew up Catholic, so there's a lot of guilt feelings. I think the Jews in those days, maybe now too, they were like guilt ridden because they were not perfect, they were not good enough, they were not giving enough money to the temple, and so they probably felt and were making, and they were made um, felt like rejects. But now here, this guy from Nazareth, nothing good comes from Nazareth, son of a carpenter, and he accepts everything. He touches the prostitute, the lepers. I think it's a good thing. It's a good feeling. That's how I felt when I was reading it, because it was something different for the times.
Oh, very different for sure. Other thoughts on that? I mean, I think he did interact with all these people who were ritually unclean, although he did usually ask them to stop doing what they're doing. So
Eventually.
he ministered to them. He didn't just interact with them. He helped them get to a better place. To me, the message here is that if we follow Christ, then we have to really welcome everyone, not just people that make us comfortable, not just people that are in our same socioeconomic status. We have to welcome everyone because Christ ministered to everyone. Now, it's obvious that he came, and he said it himself many times, he came to serve the Jewish people, to help them to get beyond this law of Moses. And he fulfilled the law of Moses so that it could pass away. But nonetheless, what he did was quite radical. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Lydia has her hand raised, so let's let her ask her question or make her comment.
I hope that you can hear me.
Yep.
But I kind of thought of it a little bit differently, I guess, because of the many countries that I've been in. It seems like every country, every culture, every group of people, take India, for example, where the classes are ranked, that they're more desirable and they're less desirable, and they have their own social reasonings for that, right? So when he came in and he was addressing people that aren't Jews, even though they weren't Jews, I'm sure they had their own social, ranking. So it must have been like a paradigm shift for everyone, pervasively, no matter what culture, what rank, what group you belong to realize that no, there's no ranking. It's God is accepting all. So I think that that was a much more profound or pervasive thing that he was doing over and above what he was saying to the Jews. That's all I thought. That's what I thought.
Yeah, no, so that Christ came not just to serve the Jews, but also others, like the Samaritan woman, like the Canaanite woman. Remember the one who said the dogs eat from the crumbs that fall from the master's table. Like there were the centurion. He interacted with pagans, not much, but some, and it was at least enough for a dissertation. So, but it's a real interesting point, I think. I mean, honestly, Christ's ministry, and she hints at this. She never really, well, maybe she does say radical. It was revolutionary. It was radical. It was completely blowing up the situation that was there in Palestine and replacing it with a new law of love. So this is really, I think, important for us to understand. And I think the author does a very nice job of showing that to us. Like the Pharisees were so unhappy with Christ because he wasn't hyper focused on ritual impurity and the other laws, but he was focused on what was on the inside, not what was on the outside. And that's new. Like that's totally new. That didn't exist before.
I hear birds.
Yeah, I'm outside. There's birds, there's dogs, there's squirrels.
Oh, that's so cool. I hope you guys are not listening to Paige snoring, although she's just stopped.
Yeah, on and off. I'm sorry that I keep freezing and unfreezing. Father
That's
Dimitri is
okay.
playing games on and off. We actually decided today that we're getting a new service. I just haven't managed to get it done yet. So, okay. So the point that I was trying to make, I'm not sure when I froze up, is that Christ's ministry was radical. It was very different than the sort of hyper focus on law. It was focused on the interior person and interior man. We'll talk about that. One thing I wanted to mention about tax collectors: when Christ spent time with tax collectors, remember that those tax collectors worked for the Romans. They had to apostatize from Judaism. They had to make pagan sacrifices. So nobody likes the tax man, but in this case, if he interacted with the tax man, it meant that he was interacting with people who had put themselves outside the true faith by apostatizing from Judaism. So that we have to keep in mind. The other thing, she mentions women, and I think it's important for us to understand that at that time, the position of women was definitely above like cattle and sheep, but not that much more. Remember that at one time, the Jews did have polygamy. That was not for that long, but they did do that. But the question of a woman's place in the next life in Judaism is still a little unclear, as it is in Islam. These are very similar religions, actually. We think of them as quite different because they're always fighting each other, it seems like, in the Middle East. But think about it. We're kind to the stranger on the street, but our cousin or our brother or sister, we'll go to war with them. And so they're actually very close. They have some different beliefs, but their phronema, their mindset is exactly the same. It's all about the law. Law, must do this, must fulfill the law, must do this thing. And so it's interesting that those two law-based religions have a real question about women's place in the next life. Can they attain the heavenly kingdom or whatever? That's not a question in Orthodox Christianity. So, and Christ made that very clear. So that's an interesting dichotomy that I think we should at least be aware of. That there are active conversations, theological conversations about the place of women in Judaism and Islam in the next life. So anyway, and Christ preached exactly against that sort of uncertainty. This is just another reason that he's not their favorite person. Okay, so any other questions, comments about that? Okay, moving forward. Oh, yep, Lori.
Are we going page by page?
Well, that's the way that I prepare the study guide.
Okay, that's fine.
But we can bounce around because I already kind of bounced ahead a little bit just because we started talking about something that I had talked about later. But we don't have to be a slave to that. So if you have something that you want to bring up, we can absolutely do that.
Oh, that's fine. I'll wait. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so modern Christians rarely recognize the exceptional and extraordinary nature of the Lord's teachings and actions. Jesus forgave sins, ate with tax collectors, and sinners, touched lepers, taught that virtue, humility, love, patience, forgiveness, mercy, and inner purity of the heart were more important than the outward observance of ritual purity. So this is obvious to us 2,000 later, but the Jews of that time saw fulfilling religious obligations and ritual purity as the highest expression of piety. And if we don't understand that, then we're going to have a lot of trouble understanding why the leaders of the Jewish people were so had such a problem with Christ, because he taught things that were not exactly what they felt. And because people, for instance, like Pharisees, felt that you had to try to fulfill as much of the law as you possibly could, when he didn't do that, then he got onto their bad list, especially as he became more and more popular with the people. Now we're on page 26. Jesus taught that simply being Jewish by blood or scrupulously keeping thousands of regulations did not guarantee that one would enter the kingdom of heaven without inner purity. So this is a huge focus of the Holy Fathers, inner purity, striving to be transformed into a child of God through our labor and God's blessing and grace. So the understanding of Christ, the understanding of Christianity, what is salvation, is completely different than Judaism or Islam. It's not about fulfilling this law or that one, or following this rule or that rule. We have rules. Of course we have rules. We have rules because that helps us to see where are the boundaries. Like where is the safe place to play and where is not the safe place to play. And that's what those rules give us. But we don't follow those rules like Jews or Muslims would. It's not a question of, if you don't do this thing, or you're not this scrupulous, or you're not, like, if you don't, like, let's say you don't follow the past strictly, we wouldn't expect necessarily to be kept out of the kingdom of heaven because we slipped and put cream in our coffee on Wednesday morning because we forgot that it was Wednesday. Not that I've ever done that. It's not like that. We wouldn't be then ritually impure and not able to go to church or something like that. It's a completely different mindset. Completely different. What's interesting, and we'll talk about this if you survive this book club and then we manage to get to the Thinking Orthodox. What's interesting is that Western Christianity more or less adopted that very juridical mindset over time. So that's very interesting, that even within our Christian, sort of big Christian family, the idea of law, fulfilling the law, really took hold in the West, but not in the Orthodox Church. Not that we ignore these things, but we're talking about being directionally correct. We're not talking about you must, boil the silverware before Great Lent begins because somehow you may not have cleaned off every microscopic piece of cheese or milk or meat. We don't do that because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So anyway, I hope that helps to give you a feel for the difference. Most Jews now live primarily secular lives and rarely observe ritual purity to a significant degree. But in the Lord's time, all Jews obeyed at least the most important requirements of the law, because otherwise they risked rejection by the community. Okay, this is a huge point that I think we need to spend a few minutes on. The community, those who surround us, have a huge impact on our faith and on the observance of our faith. If we're honest, we are driven largely by what is acceptable to our community. When Christianity was considered acceptable and laudable, Christianity flourished in North America. Now that Christianity is out of fashion with our elites, Christianity begins to wane. So those people who drive, as we would say in modern political speech, those people who drive the narrative, those people who decide what's good and what's bad, those people who talk on television, so on and so forth, they have a huge influence on us. And so do our family and friends around us. And depending on where they're getting their narrative, it may have a very significant impact on us. And we have to understand that it's not good or bad, it just is. And if we don't understand that we're strongly influenced by our community, by our close ones around us, and even, like by the mass media, then we're kind of just allowing ourselves to slip into things that are not great. It's what's an interesting, I think a real interesting point is that we have developed in our country a sort of secular societal pagan morality, right? So when our morality as a society used to be based largely on Judeo-Christian values, it was pretty easy for us to conform because it was more or less the way that we lived anyway. But it also made us lazy because we easily follow the crowd now because the crowd used to support our values. It doesn't anymore. And we have to be smart about that, and we have to be careful about that, and we have to consider the water in which we are swimming as we're thinking about the decisions that we're making. So secular morality divorced from any creed or source of truth is straight out of Roman society. The Romans didn't care what god you worshipped or pretty much how you lived, as long as you upheld the secular morality of worshiping the Roman gods and sometimes the emperor himself as a god, depending on if it was a time when the emperor was being worshipped as a god. You could more or less do what you wanted as a citizen of Rome, as long as you did that, right? So there was this secular morality that you had to follow if you wanted to be a good Roman, and then you could do all this other stuff over here, nobody cared, but you had to do that. That's why we had so many Christian martyrs when they began to implement emperor worship, because they were very strict about that, and the Christians, of course, wouldn't do it. So to me, that's the best sort of similar situation. We've gone from a societal morality which is more or less attached to Judeo-Christian values writ large, to a societal morality which is completely divorced of any truth. It's just about you have to do what people want, and if you do, you're fine. So how do I mean that? So our new sort of secular humanist society or pagan society, it really doesn't matter what god you worship, as long as you affirm things like unlimited abortion at a time in pregnancy, homosexual marriage, trans surgeries for children, redistribution of resources, social justice ideology, social justice, immigration, open borders, critical race theory, diversion, equity, inclusion. As long as you do that stuff, I don't care what you do. If you affirm that stuff, you're good to go. You're a good Christian, according to the world. But is that really what a good Christian is, right? The bad Christians, according to the world, are those that have a morality shaped by the teachings of Jesus Christ and his gospel. And that's in opposition to the secular pagan morality. So for us, obviously, the choice is clear. We need to have a morality which is based on the gospel, which is based on Jesus Christ and his teachings. That's going to make us bad Christians in the eyes of the world. It just is what it is. We just have to accept that and try to be strong. But we also can help ourselves by surrounding ourselves with like-minded people to the greatest extent possible. You go to work, those things, you're going to have to deal with them one way or another. But at home, at church, in social circles, it's good to surround ourselves with people which have similar worldviews. Not that we should be in a sycophant club of just everybody tells everybody how great they are and how great their thoughts are. But if we're constantly surrounding ourselves by people who are telling us how bad we are and how, just a little incense on the feet of the emperor, it's fine, and then you can go do what you want. It's exactly the same thing. So we need to kind of understand that and be ready to fight that fight. At least that's my thought, and I wonder what you think about that. Does anyone have thoughts about that? I doubt very seriously that the NSA is listening. They might be, but I doubt it. So
Okay.
you can probably speak openly and relatively clearly. Don't be afraid to push back if you think that I'm just blowing smoke here. But
No, Father, I used to be very liberal, and somehow there's still a little bit of that. Okay. I've changed a lot since embracing Orthodoxy, because I should have been never, um, I should have had the right ideas years ago and not just now. Because years ago, I was a good Catholic girl. So, but, like today, I was talking to my Michigan mom, and she is very liberal. She's she grew up Methodist, and now she goes to Unitarian Church, something like this.
Hmm.
Nothing wrong with that. It whatever, it's her choice. But she has totally embraced. I decided today that we no longer will have conversation about transgender
Hmm.
because she she said, but the person was born like this, and I'm like, no, no, that's wrong. But probably 10 years ago, I would have said the same thing.
Hmm.
But now it's wrong because I need to remember first and foremost that I'm a Christian and I'm also a nurse. So, I mean, it's biology. But
Right. I think sometimes people think that, okay, I became Orthodox and therefore I have to be conservative. I mean, the idea of conserving something is definitely Orthodox in that we're trying to conserve what Christ taught in the apostles. That's so that idea of
yeah,
conserving something is definitely Orthodox. But from a political point of view, the church doesn't have a party, right? So we do have morality. And so sometimes one of the political parties kind of lines up with our moral outlook, but it doesn't always last. Like,
no, it doesn't.
for instance, if you look at what's happening right now in the Republican Party, it's becoming less and less and less of a pro-life party, right? It's still kind of, for sure, more than the Democrats, but it's not like super strong anymore. It's just getting weakened and weakened. So the church will never align with a party, and we don't. Our only party is Christ, but we do have a morality, and I think we have to be not unafraid to say that. But how is it? How do we deal with this? Because Christians have had to deal with this since the beginning of Christianity, right? For 300 years, we were illegal, right? It was not legal to be a Christian. So the way we've always done it is the way we have to do it today. We have to love God, hate sin, and love sinners. And if we can do that, then we're in a good place, right? We have to hate the sin but love the sinner. We have to love God. God loves everyone. He created everyone out of love to share his love with everyone. Some people choose it. Some people choose not to accept that gift that he
Yeah,
gives them. But for us to say, like, you, because you have some sickness, that now God doesn't love you, no way. Impossible. We can't say
no,
that. We also can't say, I'm going to affirm your sickness. And I'm going to say, yes, you are definitely a cat or whatever. It's just, I don't mean to joke about it, but like there has to be also
uh-uh,
some boundaries for us as Christians where we are able to say, like, I love you, but I can't necessarily agree with what you're doing or what you're saying. That's okay. And we don't have to give people a big lecture or try to stand up for
no,
this or that or the other thing, but we need to pray for people who are suffering, and a lot of people are suffering now. A lot of people
a
are
lot
suffering.
of,
There's a lot of
yeah,
victims. And so,
that's sad because they are recognized by the society.
right, and this, I think, the reason I chose about trans, especially for children, is
Yes,
because that's clearly like a societal sickness or
yes,
strangeness. Like, you are 17 years old, or let's say 12. You're 12 years old. You can't get a tattoo without your parents. Okay. But if you go to Minnesota, we'll do whatever kind of gender surgery you want. Like, it's obvious that something is wrong. There's a sickness in society. And so what we have to understand is that we live in that society, as all Christians have since the beginning of time. Yes, there's monasticism, but all Christians have lived in such societies since the beginning of time, where there was, you know, human sacrifice and all kinds of just terrible things happening. That Christians have lived there. So we have to love the sinner and hate the sin. It's Do we have to go out and, scream on the corner and try to convince people? No, but we have to understand where we stand, and we have to understand how the society around us can influence us. I think she made a great point about how the people in Palestine, in Judea, they followed those ritual purity laws, at least to a greater or lesser extent, so they wouldn't be ostracized from their society. When that ostracization, if there is such a word, stops happening, then there's less pressure on people to conform, right? So if our society is no longer supporting Christian values, then there's less pressure on us to conform from the outside. It means we have to drive it from inside. We have to make the decisions ourselves to follow Christ, to live according to the gospel. Because if we step outside of that, there's not going to be any society to say, nope, go back, go back, go back. That's something we have to do on our own. That's not good or bad. That's just a reality. And we see this so often in the church. It really depends often on especially for young people, who they marry, right? Who they get married to. If the Orthodox spouse is strong, they usually bring the other spouse with them. If they're not, then they're gone. And it happens on somewhat of a regular basis. So it is what it is, but I think it's important for us to understand this, to not sort of say that's not happening. Society has an impact on us. We need to know that so that we can drive intrinsically doing what's right, not expecting society to say, oh, stay within those boundaries. Society will not say that anymore. So anyway, I just think that's an important point, obviously, because I talked about it for like 10 minutes. So any other thoughts about that? Kenny, you're trying to unmute.
Yes, I can't figure out
Okay.
which button to do it. Thank
Just
you.
press them all.
So I guess a thought I'm having on this, and I've had it before, is that in some cases, striving for that inner purity, that inner life, if we have that societal support, and I'll put it in quotes, or ostracization is you've used a word, can sometimes lead us to perhaps some laziness, or I'm trying to think of a good word here, but where we're not really pursuing it. So in some cases, having I hate to say too much societal support can actually be a hindrance to the inner life in a way.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree to 100%. And I think that we are in this interesting time now in our North American society, where we were born. Let's see who's here. Everybody who's here was born in a time when more or less the society had a Judeo-Christian sort of fence, more or less. There was, there's always California, whatever, but for the most part, everybody had their fence, right? And the whole society worked in that direction. And in our lifetimes, that's disappeared. There's no longer this sort of Judeo-Christian expectation of society, at least not in society writ large. In small pockets, of course, and I think in a lot of rural areas and so on and so forth, that is still a thing. But in society writ large, I would argue that it's kind of dying, and that's unfortunate. But like I said, Christians have lived in these kind of situations before. There's no reason for us to cry. We can't control it, really. All we can do is try to live lives according to the gospel and be good examples for those around us. And if everybody does that, we're going to be in good shape. Linda has her hand raised. Go ahead, Linda.
This so reminds me of a situation where I was in, and there was a counselor there, and I made a comment about some inappropriate, things, something that was not acceptable or inappropriate. And the counselor said to me, well, let's just normalize this for a minute. And as if she was going to take me back and enlighten me about how this is the norm and you are outside of the norm, and therefore you're not valid. And I just looked at her and said, because it's the norm in society doesn't make it right. And you know, and that's where so many, and I'm thinking the kids that are getting these counselors that are so whacked off, so crazy that I just had to relate that because the word that you use, let's normalize this, you know, my breath just was taken away.
Yeah, I think so. That is a common sort of let's normalize this thing, normalize that thing. Well, if it was normal, we don't need to normalize it. But anyway, this is a common sort of thing. I take a lot of solace in the lives of the early Christians from before the time of the Edict of Milan, and there's not a ton of material from their lives, but we do have some. We do have some. And I will send out one that I find particularly useful. It describes the lives of Christians in about the year 150 or 160, and it's very useful for us, I think, to see how our forefathers and foremothers lived in a society which was essentially opposed to their way of life, right? Where there was human sacrifice, where there was slavery, where there was, you know, on and on and on and on and on, and that Christianity was illegal. Now, I think having a victim complex is worse than useless. It's counterproductive. I just think it's good for us to also embrace reality. And a lot of times we see these kind of crazy things happening and we're like, no, that's just some minority, small minority of people. Well, maybe it is, but they have a big voice. And if we understand that, we can keep ourselves in the structure we build for ourselves. We'll have this intrinsic drive to stay close to Christ, and that can only be good. So.
I just had another thought as we were discussing this. I think we're talking about society as in perhaps the general society of, say, a country or something of a large scale. But then I think we've also talked about, I think you mentioned this kind of the support system that, say, we might have at a parish level, which is in a sense a society as well, but a much smaller scale. And I think that, most of our spiritual lives would probably be uh, not nearly as good if we didn't have that. If we were having to do this literally by ourselves, a monk on a pole in the desert or something like that. Maybe there's a few of us that could do that, but needing that, I guess, small scale society to support is very important. And so I guess there's just two levels of society I see in some of these conversations we're having.
For sure, for sure. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's why the parish as the cell kind of level of the church is absolutely crucial. So I could not agree more with you. I don't think it's a story that we should cry about. It is what it is. I just think it's important that we address the thing head on rather than sort of pretend that it's not happening. And especially because for the vast majority of the time that Christianity has existed on this earth, the Christians have been on the outs. They haven't been the cool kids. And that's okay. As long as we understand that, then we have all of those great examples from before. And I'll send you this letter. I think it's Eusebius. I have to look back at it though, but it's very, very interesting and I think very helpful. It's not long. It's not long, but it describes the life of Christians in the 2nd century, and I think really interesting. Another thing we have, another interesting series of letters that we have access to is the correspondence between the Western and Eastern emperors during the time of one of the early plagues of the Christian era. There were 2 major plagues before the Edict of Milan. Both of them were hemorrhagic fever plagues. So not like COVID, which was respiratory. This was, you walked down the street, you started to bleed out of your ears and your eyes, and you fell down dead.
Sounds like
Right?
Ebola.
Like Ebola, yeah. This is the idea of Ebola. So the correspondence between the
You're freezing.
I guess hemorrhagic diseases got him censored.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lori.
What happened to Father?
Rose.
I think that free internet went away.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least the
That's not-
cable is laid.
Oh my goodness. I almost burned dinner.
Oh no.
Oh,
Almost. Thank God I smelled something funky. I was like, oh, it's safe. It's safe. You know, nothing good comes when it's free, I have to say. There's always a little price we should pay, like the internet, free internet. I don't
Yep.
think so.
Totally.
He's gone.
I'm gonna try to log back in.
Oh, he
Yeah.
completely dropped out. No.
Yeah.
Lori, did you text him?
I can.
Yeah, I'm thinking I can try to do that.
I'll try to get my camera going while you guys are doing that.
Let me see. You are gone. Oh my gosh.
So Father Gregory says, network connection lost. Please ask forgiveness of everyone. We'll have to call it a night.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.
good
Bye,
night.
everybody. Nice. Hey, good luck on the festival, you guys. My prayers are with you.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
So kind.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.